I'm trying to decide if I have any like big arm gestures or not. And I think we'll just wing it. All right, everybody can hear me okay? It works out? Perfect. Okay, so first off, thank you very much to everybody for coming, making it back after lunch. And thanks to the organizers of CGX2017 for having me here today. Today I'm going to give you a talk that I've titled A Club That Just So Happens to Make Money. There's two keyboards. So my name is Keon, and I'm one of the founders of Karman Interactive. And we are a services-based studio, which means that we make games and apps and other experiences for our clients. We were founded here in September of 2012, right here in Ottawa. And as I was saying, like, we build all sorts of different experiences for our clients, and I'll take you through a couple of them right now. So one of the first ones that we ended up doing that we're kind of pretty proud of is a bunch of augmented reality books. These are books that you could purchase physically in the stores at Walmart and Target and that sort of thing. And the idea is that all the kids, they want to play with their tablets, they want to play with your mobile phones, but we also as parents want them to read. So these books would allow you to read the physical book with your child, and then on certain pages there'd be augmented reality enabled content where you could play games with the characters and that sort of thing. And so we were really fortunate that we got to work with brands like Disney. We did an Olaf book and a Mickey Mouse book. And then we also worked with Mind Candy and their property Moshi Monsters, where we did a coloring book, and we kind of extended on that augmented reality tech. And we basically, whatever the camera saw when you were drawing in the coloring world, like the physical world, we would take that information and apply it to the model on the characters so that the kid's drawing would kind of come to life. We also do more traditional app development. This is a gamified newsreader for Publishers Clearinghouse called PCH Front Page. And it gives you your news, it gives you like weather, lottery information, all that sort of thing. And we've kind of gamified it and built that all out in Unity. We've done some game development as well. This is a mobile title called Tiki Rush that we did with Sony. This was for their PS Vita platform and their Sony PlayStation Mobile platform. This one was really interesting because even though it would be able to run on Android tablets, which typically have between 1 and 2 gigs worth of memory, the runtime for PlayStation Mobile was restricted to 96 megs. And we still had to support all the graphics that were on those high-res screens and everything like that. So there are a lot of technical challenges with that. And finally, virtual reality. So we have a title in Steam right now, which is kind of like a tech demo called Fireworks Desert Blast. It's like you walk around in the desert and you can kind of set up fireworks and make your own fireworks show. And then we're doing a lot of stuff with Google Daydream. So we're doing a social VR platform called Vicarious VR, which is a company out in San Francisco. And then we're also developing our own title that was greenlit by Google called 2-Star Resort. So you're in the swamps of Louisiana and you're working at a really crappy 2-star resort, and your guests are questionable at best. And you're a minimum wage worker who's got a fly swatter, and your whole job is just to keep the bugs away from those guests. Okay, so the core purpose of the talk today is, and mostly a lot of the stuff that we're talking about at this conference is about businesses, studios, how they run, what we're doing with them. So I kind of want to talk about our experience in creating our business and provide our take on that whole genre. So if you go to your local bookstore, like a Chapters or a Kohl's or something like that, there's a ton of books on making a successful business. There's lots of courses, there's workshops, there's conferences where people speak about how to do successful business. And so there's a ton of resources out there. All of these resources, they're generally written or presented by like the titans of their industry. These are people who have, Fortune 500 companies, so they've got a lot of credibility. Or they're serial entrepreneurs, and they've ended up, this is like their 5th or 6th company that they've ended up creating and selling, that sort of thing. Or they've ended up going and raising just millions in capital, so they've got that kind of cred from it. And yet, despite all of this, businesses still fail, and often frequently. And yet still, we have more books that keep coming out. We have more talks about successful businesses being given. This guy's problem is that he didn't use wood for his arrows like she did. So clearly he needed to plan ahead and get a larger chart. And so I've kind of concluded that in the 5 years that we've kind of been doing this business, that no one really knows what they're doing. They give off the impression that they know what they're doing. They have some, data that backs up, like these are good decisions that will probably work out. And there's obviously a lot of really good nuggets and perspectives in those books and conferences and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, there's no rules in business. Whoever you work for today, there's no rules in really what they're doing. They're just somehow managing to convince other individuals or other companies to pay them for whatever it is that they create, be it a service or a product or that sort of thing. So for us at Karman, we also have absolutely no idea what we're doing. We're definitely not titans in any sense of the word. I'm a whopping 5'8" currently, and I guess I'm only going to go down because I'm past that growing point. We're definitely not ranked anywhere. This is the first business that we've ever created, and we ended up doing it with zero capital. But we are trying to do things differently. So we're trying to do things that are less of a traditional business. We're definitely more of a lifestyle business. And so we're trying to create things that are more like a club that also just happens to make money. So I want to talk about the motivations for why we wanted to start building Karman in the very first place. So we started our career in a really fast-paced advertising environment. There were tons and tons of projects. It wasn't uncommon for a project to happen every 4 weeks from brainstorm kickoff to shipping. And because of that, we had the opportunity to learn really, really fast. You would go through, do the project, make a ton of mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and then iterate onto the next project. At the same time, we also got to work with a lot of really, really talented people. Everybody that we were working with was kind of at the top of their game. These people were winning awards, and so it was a really encouraging environment from that perspective. As you can imagine, there were some downsides as well. The hours were super long. There was one time I remember, it was a Christmas, and I think me and another guy, we ended up working on the 23rd, the entire night through to Christmas Eve. At about 5:30 in the morning, I popped out, had a quick shower, came back, worked that whole day, did get Christmas off, but then had a conference call on Boxing Day, and it was super awesome. The families were also super impressed by that, but that was kind of like, that's just what happened, right? You're also kind of subject to a boom and bust cycle. So there's lots of times where you're in a heyday and there's tons of clients and they want lots of different work to be done and everything is great, there's money is flowing. And then sometimes you end up going through these bust cycles where there's not, and then you have to deal with things like layoffs and that kind of thing. And I just kind of like this picture because that guy is super ominous. So from there, I ended up moving over to the enterprise side of things. So I got a job in enterprise software development, and it was very, very different. So the pay was phenomenal. There was bonuses, there was crazy vacation, there was budget for healthy living expenses, that sort of thing. So if you wanted a gym membership or to buy a bike, that got covered. And you also, the one parallel is kind of like you got to work with really, really smart people. These were people that deep dived on their tech. They'd been at the company for 25 plus years, so they knew their stuff. So there are lots of good opportunities there as well. The problems here, of course, were that the team was so massive that you had such a limited impact in what you were able to do. So even though I was working there and it was really great, the part that I got to touch was so tiny that I didn't really feel like I had a good grasp on the entire project. Because there was only one project and it was going for a product, then the things moved at a much, much slower pace than what I was doing before. So while it was a great opportunity, it was a great company to work for, great people, everything like that, I ended up being so bored and I didn't know what I was going to do next. So despite the hardships of the fast-paced environment, we found ourselves really longing for that faster pace, and we wanted to be able to touch and control more of the project. And so we wanted to think, if we're going to go back and we're going to do the fast-paced stuff, let's not go get a job at the fast-paced studios. Let's just see if we can create our own, and how can we bring along the good that we've experienced in both places and try and mitigate the bad. So we're going to talk a little bit about our strategy. So again, like I said, we're a lifestyle business, and we're about slow, controlled growth. We're not interested in scaling up really, really quick and adding on 30 people, that kind of thing. We're about hiring maybe 1, possibly 2 people a year, that sort of thing, and doing a very slow, controlled growth that's safe. I guess risk-adverse entrepreneurs, if that's a thing. One of the big things that we want to do is build up a reserve fund. So we know that in the line of business that we're in, there are those boom and bust cycles, and we need to be able to weather those bust cycles. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is we build up a reserve fund so that if for whatever reason we lose all of our clients and we have no revenue going on, we want to be able to have a runway to support everybody in the office for at least a year. So that's a lot more than most companies. We've typically the rule's around 3 months or so, but we've heard stories about some people who are riding the 2-week razor edge for years kind of thing, which is super scary for us. And so we've been really trying hard to push that up to a year. We've gotten there a couple of times, and then of course we've hired, and so that's brought us back down, but we're just trying to always push to that 1-year mark. With our clients, we try to take the approach of less of a job in, get it done, ship it out, move on to the next, and we're more about developing those long-term relationships. Part of that is with the clear lines of communication. The people that we hire, the people that we work with, there aren't any middlemen or anything like that. The person that you work with is the person actually, the main contact, sorry, is the person that's actually doing the work on your project. And we find that this allows us to get aligned with our clients' goals and make sure that we understand their project, and we can start doing things where we suggest features, we bring up red flags, we become more ingrained, almost like remote employees that have a vested interest, because obviously if the product does better, you're going to keep using us, and it just kind of a symbiotic relationship sort of thing. And then for our employees, so they're called employees technically, but they're really more than that for us. We kind of have mini businesses inside of the business, and we want to grant all of our employees the autonomy to kind of own the client and own the project. And so if you're a developer, sometimes there are people who just want a job, and then sometimes there are people who want a career. And so at least in this early stage, we're more focused on people who want the career and want to grow and want to touch more than just development or more than just art, but actually more of the business side of things too, like owning that client and owning the project. Part of that is because you're smart people, we trust smart people, we want you guys to be efficient. When you come on board, we give you a budget to choose your own equipment. So if you have a certain keyboard that you really like, a certain mouse, headstand, or a headset, laptop stand, that sort of thing, whatever it is, we're going to purchase that for you because it's going to make you more efficient in the long run and get you better to do your job. We also do something like R&D time. So we feel research and development is really important, and we really feel that because we're small and because there's all these new technologies that come up all the time, augmented reality, virtual reality, IoT, wearables, that sort of thing, we're able to kind of pivot and try out these new technologies, but we need to do the R&D to be able to kind of speak to our credibility about it. So similar to kind of vacation time, like you would at a normal job, you also accrue research and development time. So you accrue that time, and then whenever you want to take that time, you basically book it off like you would vacation. We would just tell our clients that, okay, we're either piecing it in between a job or we're actually just booking you off of that time. And then you can basically do your research and development project. The topic of that project is whatever you want. If you want to learn how to knit for 3 weeks, you can learn how to knit on the company's dime. That's totally fine. We don't want to put a limitation on that sort of thing because we believe that if we give you those restrictions, then people are going to be trying to always think about the business opportunities of it, and it's kind of too narrow. We want you to try and explore different types of things that are maybe even outside of the wheelhouse, because there may be an opportunity that no one else is seeing that we'll maybe be able to capitalize on later on. The one caveat to this sort of thing, though, is that whatever you learn or whatever you do with your research project, you need to share it with your peers. So that's either coming up and doing a conference like this, that's doing a blog post, that's doing a lunch and learn, whatever it may be. And that's sort of just to instill a little bit of social pressure so that, you know, whatever you're going to do, you feel confident that you can actually accomplish something reasonable to talk about. So if you feel confident about knitting, then you can do knitting, provided you can give a talk about knitting afterwards. We also have an uncapped bonus structure. I won't go into too much detail about that, but basically if the company wins, you win significantly. And there's no hierarchy. So yeah, technically Mike and I, we run the business and you report to us, but really, like I said, we want everybody to kind of run like their own little mini business inside the business, and it's all about how you can find your value to boost the business along. The last thing about that is the IP policy. And this kind of gets its own little section here because I'm going to jump on a soapbox because I feel very passionate about this. So with IP policies, typically they're super, super restrictive. The default is generally that the employer owns everything that you do, and that's the default, and I feel like we can kind of do better than that. So of course, when we started digging into this, it's not that black and white. It's obviously a lot more complex. But basically, the reason why a lot of these IP policies exist is because it would be very crippling to the business if they don't actually end up owning the IP. There's an example given earlier, and give the same one right now. If somebody has created something for your product and they own the IP, and then they have a falling out with them or something like that, or an investor wants to end up buying your company for something, if you don't own that piece, then that person now has a ton of leverage where they can screw you over. You're not able to use your product. People lose their jobs. It's really bad. So to combat that, what ends up happening is the employees tend to do things where if they end up having a lot of side projects, they have to keep it a secret and not tell anybody about it, or they have to quit their jobs in order to engage with that project or capitalize on it. Personally, I kind of find this incredibly demotivating. I would hate to have a really great idea, want to work on something, but then feel like I have to quit my job in order to actually do something with it. So what ends up happening, and what ended up happening with us, is it kind of leads to stagnation. There's no point in having good ideas if you can't do anything about them, so you just stop having them. You stop thinking about that stuff, and you stop working on that stuff in your own time, and you end up doing just basically only what you're being paid to do at your day job. There is a way that you can kind of combat this where you end up going and you do the job switch pre-existing maneuver. So most companies, if you have a pre-existing IP, you're allowed to own that and keep that. So you can do something where you quit your job, get a new job, and say, hey, this project is mine, and then obviously you can keep working on it at that point. But it requires you to quit your job and get a new job, and you can only do that so many times every time you have a new idea that may or may not work out. So what we ended up doing is we worked with our lawyers, which is a big shout out to LaBarge Weinstein. If you are looking for a tech lawyer, they're very excellent. And it really wasn't that hard to kind of come up with this. So we came up with a fair IP policy for both parties, one where the company is protected and one where the employee is free to pursue whatever they want to do without the fear that we're going to come down on them and be like, but I own that, and therefore all that revenue is mine. So basically, Karman owns everything. And that's it. It's really that simple. Obviously, initially, this is only the default state. And so this really just ensures that there's way less paperwork and that the company is protected from that default state. We don't have to worry about things falling through the cracks. If for whatever reason, 10,000 IP projects got submitted, we don't have to worry that we have to go through every single one and say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, or anything like that. By default, Karman owns everything, but we're very lenient on how it gets divvied out. So basically, if you have a project and you want to work on it, you can start and work on this side project right away. There's no wait time, there's no approval needed. I know back when I was at the enterprise job, I had an idea for a really simple game. Did not compete, obviously, with the enterprise software in any way, and so I submitted a request that I wanted to work on it. And it took them 6 months to get back to me, which, fair enough, like obviously their lawyers had way better things to do running the enterprise company than dealing with me and my request for just a little tiny side project. But the problem is that by the time I heard back 6 months later, I had no interest in working on that game anymore. I had moved on, I had other ideas and all this kind of thing. And needless to say, I never ended up submitting another idea because I couldn't wait that long to know if I could do it or not. The other thing is that you're totally free to use company equipment and licenses. We're already paying for these things, and we would definitely be thrilled if you had actually used them. So please put them to use, work on your side projects using that equipment, using those licenses. It's not a problem whatsoever. Now at some point you're going to want to release your project. So when that happens, you're going to do just a quick discussion with us for what you want to do. And there's basically two outcomes. You can get an IP release, which means you own everything, you can do whatever you want, or you can partner with us in some way for a rev share. We've instituted that there's a 10 business day turnaround. Otherwise, it's automatically defaults to an IP release, and you just get the whole ownership of your thing, and you can go do whatever you want with it. And this kind of just makes sure that you're never in that situation of 6 months or in a situation where we can just stall forever and basically starve you out. So in the IP release, so long as it's eligible, so if it's not illegal, and then you're not going to directly compete with the company in some way, like if we are about to release a match 3 game and then your IP is a match 3 game, then maybe there's a bit of a conflict of interest. But if we're not doing one and you want to release a match 3 game, great, awesome. We totally encourage it and would help you in any way we can. When you get the IP release, you own the entire thing. You can do whatever you want with it. You can collect any or all associated revenue that comes with that. We're not going to touch it. We have no claim to it whatsoever. The other side of things is a rev share. And this is something that we kind of hope that our employees take advantage of because we're hoping that people can both win. But again, it's totally cool if you want to just do it on your own time. Sometimes people, there's an element of pride to it where they want to do the whole thing on their own, and that's totally cool. So maybe you end up wanting some help. Maybe you just want the name. You want to release under our brand because for some reason we've gotten more famous and people know us. Maybe you need like 3D animations because you're not a 3D animator. Maybe you need a team of 10 for 2 years to finish it off. We do something where it's basically a fair rev share based on the effort in and the dollars in and a percentage out. So if you do 98% of the work and Karman does 2% of the work, then that's the rev share. You get 98%. There's none of this sort of like we get a minimum cut or anything like that, or we do something where, like we take the 70 and the 30% split or anything like that. It's basically if you put in most of the work, you get most of the reward. So I feel like there's a lot of benefits here as an employer. If I have motivated employees, they remain motivated because they want to work on their stuff on their own time. Great, that's awesome. It also lets my workforce pick up new technologies. If they're interested in trying something new that's maybe not part of our day job, like IoT or something like that, and they experiment with it, now all of a sudden we have another skill set in our wheelhouse that we can then go to clients with and say, hey, yeah, we're actually proficient in this. Check out this side project that one of our employees did. It's also free training and skills advancement for us. So if you're working on things, especially if you're using our equipment, it's only going to make you better in your day job. So there's no reason why we wouldn't want you to be encouraged to work on that sort of thing. And then there's also industry credibility in the event of a big success. And what I mean by that is one of the fears is sometimes if we let employees work on their own projects, what if they're really good and then they leave, right? Now we've lost that employee and they've made the next Minecraft, they're making millions of dollars and that sort of thing. And I think hopefully, because we fostered this environment, maybe they'll want to stay, because obviously if you make the next Minecraft, we'll just let you do whatever you want, and you can make the next Minecraft and the next Minecraft. We'd love for you to stay, but I understand like you might want to go leave and do your own thing. So even if you do that, we still get to say that we're the company who hired the person who made the next Minecraft, and this environment let them do that. So anybody else who has an idea or a dream of being able to make their next big thing, they know that this is a safe place to work where they can do that until they end up getting that success. And if they don't, they're still safe because they have a good job. From the employee side of things, I think it's really good because if you have an exciting idea, you can execute immediately. You don't have to wait. You can just go right ahead right away. No matter what, you always get to own your own project, and you know that no one's ever going to restrict you. So even if we do a rev share thing, and even if Karman's ends up doing 98% of the work, and you're only doing a tiny little schmidget, you own that project creatively. So we're not going to be able to go and say, no, the character should be 10 feet taller and all this kind of stuff. If you don't like that idea, you have the final say. Now, obviously, if we don't agree with that, then maybe we are not going to support as much or whatever it might be. Like there's a natural discussion there. But the point is that we're not going to ever do something where you've come up with an idea and that's your baby, and now we're going to bastardize it for our gain kind of thing. It's that discussion between both parties kind of thing. And then obviously you have an opportunity to make extra cash. So, the Minecraft idea is one side of things where it's really extreme. And there's a whole bunch of other times where you're going to make something that's going to go up and maybe make like $1 or $2. But there's all this mid-tier kind of aspects where like maybe you're going to make a Unity asset store plugin. And maybe that's going to make, a couple extra grand a year, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 kind of thing. That's just extra cash in your pocket. Karman doesn't touch it in any way because we've signed an IP release. And you've also increased your skill set and you have more portfolio pieces and all that kind of stuff. So we really want to encourage our employees to explore those options and be able to better themselves through that. So to recap, like I was saying, fair deal to everyone. Both parties are protected, and there's obviously some huge potential benefits. The thing that's kind of really exciting to me is, like, we're a small company, and so I'm sure, like, at the bigger scale, maybe there's some ways where there's more edge cases and loopholes in this. We definitely sat down a lot going through this, and we basically, one side played the client, or one side played the company, one side played the employee. We basically tried to screw each other over and, you know, basically just blocked it and all this kind of stuff. But what's really cool is that GitHub just announced that they've restructured their IP policy. And so they're a big company, and they're going in the same direction that we're going, where they're letting their employees do their stuff, and they're letting them use the company equipment to do so, and trying to encourage that. So I'm hoping that there's a bit of a shift here, where if the big dogs start doing it, all the medium people who look up to the big dogs, they're going to start doing it too, and it's not just going to be the small guys like us who can take these kind of more risky maneuvers and then try and talk about them and try and get people to buy into them. Obviously, we've been tooting our own horn a little bit here, so it wouldn't be fair to go through all of that without talking a little bit about some of our failures as well. So when we first started, I know there was a couple chats earlier about funding opportunities and that sort of thing. We ended up getting an initial loan through CYBF, which is the Canadian Youth Business Foundation, where youth is up to like 35 or something like that, so it's pretty lenient. And we ended up getting 15K kind of to start. As part of that, though, they made us do a business plan. And this wasn't a business plan like, hey, we're going to sell software as a service to clients and they're going to pay us kind of thing. It was very, very detailed. They made you really deep dive. We had to do 2 years of financial projections with revenue forecasts for every single month. And we had zero revenue at the beginning, so we had no idea how we were going to kind of do this. But it really forced us to go through everything and understand how our business was going to work. And as part of that, we kind of put in our plan that we were going to launch 4 IP titles in the first year, 1 every quarter. And so now we're 5 years in, and we've launched 0. Actually, that's not true. We've launched half of 1, which is like a tech demo kind of thing. But still, we vastly overestimated or underestimated the amount of work that it was going to take. And we still have just been more focused on the services side of the business. At one point, we kind of strayed from our core ethos of being a slow, controlled growth business. And we had a huge influx of projects. And all of our mentors were kind of saying, like, say yes, always say yes, always say yes, always say yes, and figure out how to do it later. And we said yes, and then we had a really hard time figuring out how to do it later. So we ended up finding a company to subcontract to who seemed really great. And we just gave them the job, and we're like, okay, this is great, perfect, you can take it, go. And 2 days before launch, they reached out to us and they said, hey, we're like 2 weeks out minimum kind of thing. And our client was already saying, like, hey, we need that final build, like, where is it, all this kind of stuff. And we were freaking out. Like, it was the craziest scrambling ever. We went back to the whole long hours thing, which really sucked. And we had to call in basically every favor that we ever could. I think even Mike's wife at one point was jumping on and helping us by doing CSS coding just to make things go, because it was a really bad time. But we kind of learned from that in that we needed to make sure that we were identifying who we were. We are a slow lifestyle business, and that means that, you know, sometimes we need to say no, or sometimes we need to think about how can we say yes in a more secure manner. So now one of the things that we do is whenever we're sort of going to vet a contractor or any other sort of party, we actually pay them to do a job for us that has no repercussions. There's no client on the other end, that sort of thing. There may be an actual client on the other end, but somebody else is doing that work, and we're investing, but we're going to pay that person to do the same work, and that's the test. So that we can ensure that whenever we go to our clients, we're guaranteeing that we know that we can get it done and that we can stand by our word. And then the most recent one is centered around sales. So beginning of 2016, which was just last year, we lost 2 of our biggest clients. One of them ended up going out of business, and the other one went through major layoffs. And obviously, outsourcing to us or using us for any of their projects was no longer on the table. Up until that point, we've kind of been really fortunate in that most of our contracts and everything, all our connections, everything that we kind of had gotten had been through our personal networks. People that we knew, people who knew what we did, they knew that they could trust us, they would refer us to places, that sort of thing. But we were really, really terrible at sales. So we ended up hiring a sales guy, and we began a huge amount of outreach over 2016. We did tons and tons of cold emails, all that kind of stuff. And we learned from that obviously we had known nothing about sales and none of it worked. So we went through the entire year and we didn't manage to end up selling anything. But what we did learn, and this kind of goes back to our R&D, is like we sort of look at that as a whole year-long R&D project. We learned tons of things about what didn't work, but then we learned a whole bunch of things that did work. And we started working with other people to kind of generate, like we had success with our personal networks, so how do we grow our personal networks? So now we're starting to do things where we're traveling around all over the States, all over Canada. We're giving talks, we're meeting new people, and that's getting us in the door to actually talk to these people. They're interested in talking to us. They're interested in, trying out a little project, which then always ends up growing into a larger project. And 2017 seems to be going much better. So the point is, obviously, all of these are okay, these failures, provided that we can actually learn something from them. So I think it's really important that when you run into these failures and you identify them, you can also articulate like what went wrong and how am I going to learn from it and deal with this in the future. So this may sound really good, but obviously we want to know whether it's working. So the short answer is yes-ish. So we're almost 5 years in. We are profitable. So in a strict business sense, yes, it is working. We have been every year, which is great. We ended up supporting 6 full-time employees, plus a network of contractors that are seriously quite phenomenal. We're really lucky to work with the people that we do. And again, it comes through that much heavier vetting process, investing our dollars into that to make sure that we get the top talent out the other side. We have our first 2 RevShare IP projects that were done by an employee. They're going to be Unity Asset Store plugins that are going to go up. And really, our involvement is very minor. They just want to release it under our name, and we're going to do a little bit of a marketing push. So we're going to put some dollars into it, that kind of thing. But the lion's share of it is all going to go to them. And they did this all in their own time, and it's fantastic. And then obviously, as I hope you could see from our portfolio, we've had these opportunities to work on really, really interesting projects with some really, really interesting clients and various different technologies. So we're pretty thrilled about it. So I think the whole thing for us is really the core idea is that when the company wins, the employees win too. And I know that sounds like terrible business speak and all this kind of stuff, right? We're almost going to say 5 minutes, perfect. Like synergizing and all that kind of stuff. But we back that up with written, actual, and significant means. So if the company actually does well, there's written clauses in there to make sure that you as the employee benefit. And from that, we're hoping that people end up finding their value, they get inspired, because they're running their own little mini business in there, they're going to end up pushing the company ahead, and then instead of us just kind of dragging them along. So again, it goes to that whole thing of job versus career. We want the people who are interested in careers rather than just a job. Also, we play D&D sometimes at lunch, and I guess this is a good Photoshop of me as a dwarf. Okay, so thank you very much. I'd be happy to take any questions or comments or anything like that at this point. I will also take concerns. No questions? Oh, question? Yes.
So a question for you with the IP share.
Yeah.
When you have an employee who's wants to do a rev share with you, so you basically become, this is the question, you basically become a service provider for your own employee? And if so, how do you work that complex of power struggle between the two as the roles are shifted?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The question was basically, if an employee ends up having a project and they want to do a rev share, do we become a service provider to them? Or are they now our client kind of thing? And the answer to that is no. If there's any sort of rev share agreement, Karman still owns the IP, and the revenue flows through Karman, and we pay the employee out their rev share. So if $10,000 comes into Karman from whatever they end up making, and they own, like their rev share is 90%, we give them the $9,000 and we keep that $1,000. And this kind of just, it's more from a tax perspective than anything else. And it prevents the need to set up separate service contract agreements and legal and all this kind of stuff with them. So the money just comes into Karman. We know what the hours and the money in kind of rev share split is, and then we just pay the employee out. It definitely could cause conflict. The employee retains creative ownership of the project. So let's say we have a rev share agreement and we have that $10,000 and we have that 90-10 split kind of thing, 90% for the employee, 10% for us kind of thing. If the employee says, okay, now I want to do this, and we as Karman strongly disagree, then we can just back out. We can say we no longer want to be part of this. You can keep doing whatever you want. We retain the piece that we put in. So if we put in that 10%, but then the employee goes on and they end up doing, I don't know, another 500 hours worth of work on it, their share increases, our share diminishes, but we never lose what we put into it kind of thing, right? The money still flows through Karman and it just gets paid out the same way kind of thing. Yeah?
Just curious, how do you pay it out? Is it a bonus or is it part of salary, or how does that look on?
Right now it ends up being a bonus payment. Yeah.
You mentioned how you lost certain clients and you haven't put out anything in 5 years. How have you managed to stay profitable throughout all that?
Yeah, so we're a services-based business for the most part. So other companies pay us to do development for them. So we build their products for them. When I said that we've been in 5 years and we haven't put out anything, I mean we haven't put out anything that we've created internally ourselves. Yeah.
So how do you deal with time, I guess, measuring time? Like let's somebody's working for you, but they end up spending a lot of kind of company time and company equipment to work on their own thing, and then they come to you asking to, have that IP ownership or whatever. So how do you manage like how much time they're spending working on their own stuff versus company stuff?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So if people couldn't hear, basically it was how do you manage an employee's time and how they're dealing with, working on their day job and working on their off hours, and where's that split and like how that factors into the IP agreement. So basically the idea is that we don't want our employees to burn out. So we don't want to encourage people to do 40 hours a week at Karman and then go do 40 hours a week doing their own thing, because we feel like that could be a little bit detrimental. So what we do is, as long as you're hitting, well, for us it's 37.5, but as long as you're hitting that 37.5 hours a week kind of thing, roughly, you're adults, right? We're not going to audit you kind of thing. But basically, as long as you're doing like your day job, whatever you do on your own time is totally fine. And then we sort of institute a bit of a cap on that. So you only get credit for like 20 hours. If you do 40 hours a week, you get credit for 20 hours a week that will go towards the rev share sort of thing. But it's spread over time. So the idea is like you could end up having basically 99.9999% kind of thing, but it's got to be spread over time so that you're still being a healthy individual, and we're not encouraging you to work yourself to death or do something where you go and you work all night on your own project and then you come into work and you're dead tired and you're not effective kind of thing. So that's sort of how it ends up being structured, and basically it just means that the timeline kind of increases if you want to have more share or anything like that. So it basically there's a diminishing return if you work basically time and a half in a week, which is to hopefully encourage you to not kill yourself to do that. Yes?
So a lot of thought you put into the fact that you're a services company right now. Do you hope that continues, or do you see yourself as like a studio incubator in the future? Where is this going?
So we'll always do services. I think the core thing that we like about services is that it puts you in situations where you're not allowed to fail. So if we're working on our own project and we run into a really hard challenge, we can just change the feature, or we can cut it, or we can just not do it, and that's fine. When we run into a really hard challenge on a services gig, the client doesn't pay you unless you get it done. So you get put in those situations and you end up learning faster and you end up achieving more, I feel. And so we always want to have that element there, but the idea is obviously to build up our treasure chest at some point so that we can go, I guess a war chest, not a treasure chest, but a chest with money in it, we want to build that up so there's lots of it in there so that we can try and do our own product at some point. But again, because we're risk adverse and that whole thing with the buffer, if it fails, if it makes $0, that's okay because we still have the services business to fall back on. So that's kind of the goal, is basically build up, I don't know, maybe 15-ish people total kind of thing. And we'd have, I don't know, 2/3 of them doing services work, and then we'd kind of have 5 people working on a product. And then once that product, looks like it's really going to do well, then we can put more resources on it and try it. And if the market really likes it, then we can keep doing that and scale down our services. But services will always be part of it. All right. Oh, yeah.
As like a services business that works with like other IT and stuff, how do you, I guess, as a company and as individuals, find balance between like, I guess, feeling like you're selling out, but also being able to like be creative in your own right?
Okay, that's a tricky question. So the question is basically, how do I not feel like a sellout doing the work that I do? I'm paraphrasing for comedic effect, but yeah. I guess basically, we have our ideas that we like to work on our R&D time. We have our IP ideas that we want to do, and that's kind of that's the art. And then there's the business side of things where we need to make money, and we need to pay our people, and we need to be able to get the business to grow and all that sort of thing. And so it's a necessary component, but there's a ton of our clients, like we choose our clients as much as we can. Obviously, sometimes you got to take jobs where you can take jobs, but we try and choose people that we like them. It's a relationship. We align with what they're doing. Sometimes that's not always the case, and then that's where you just fall back on, well, what's the problem that they're trying to solve here? And that's a really interesting general problem that we'd like to get better at. So there's things that we do that we really like the challenge. We want to solve that challenge, and it doesn't feel like selling out, I guess, because these things need to get built, and we're good at building them. So if we're the ones building them, then we can make them better so that the world kind of changes its view on whatever the sellout property is, kind of thing. I think that's it all the time. Anyways, feel free, run into me, ask me questions, all that kind of stuff. Tell me I'm completely wrong and I've offended you in some way. I'm happy to chat anytime. And we're here with 2 other people from Karman, so they're also happy to chat anytime as well. Thank you very much, and stay tuned because after this is Mike Mood. Mike Mood is giving a presentation. It's going to be super exciting. He's actually one of our contractors that we've been working with for a long time. He's phenomenal. We wouldn't be here without his help. So please give him a warm welcome.